Okay, so let's get started for the sake of time. I want to be respectful of your lunchtime and mine as well. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this session of our next Strategic HR webinar series. Our focus for today is on a very important aspect of strategic HR, total rewards, and within that specifically, base pay. It is a hot topic for all organizations nowadays in this first quarter of the year. So today we're going to see how to manage it well, what are some hot topics around it, and anything that is in your interest. But before we jump in, let's do a little housekeeping as always. As always, during the call, we're going to keep everyone muted and camera off in order to avoid background noises and distraction. But feel free to drop any questions you may have during the call in the chat box. And we also carved that time for Q&A in the end. We hope that one of our external consultants specializing in rewards will join us for the last half an hour. So you can post all your questions at the end as well. The call is scheduled to be 90 minutes, and we will make sure to finish on time so no one starves. And the certificate of completion will be awarded to those who registered and stayed till the end. The call is recorded as always, so you're going to be able to rewatch it anytime on our YouTube channel, where, by the way, you can also find our previous sessions. We are not going to post it right away after the meeting, so no need to ping us. We are not going to forget it. We're going to post it there in a couple of days. So by the end of next week, it's going to be available. Any questions before we jump in? Okay, let's assume that that's a no. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat in the meantime as well. My co-funding partner, Esther, is here with us on the call, so she's going to manage the chat if there are any burning questions during the call. So today we're going to talk about the concept of total rewards. What are its main components and the criteria of an effective reward system? We will walk you through the basic steps to design a fair and equitable pay structure. We will only discuss salaries in great detail today, and we'll probably dedicate another session or another webinar to other financial and non-financial compensation and benefit elements. By the end of this session, you will understand how total rewards and compensation is a key strategy enabler. What are the main characteristics of an effective reward system, the common pitfalls, and the background of some of the hot topics that we have chosen in terms of comp and ben. So we have quite a packed agenda. It's not going to be interactive for today as an exception, but again, feel free to ask any questions now or later, and let's get started. So why compensation matters? That would be the first question of mine. Comp and ben is usually at least 60% of all organizations' P&L. So there's an inherent need coming from the management to keep it low as possible to realize more profit, obviously. On the other hand, everybody wants to earn more. So there is an inherent push from the workforce to increase these costs. The goal of Comp and Ben is to recruit and retain the best people from the talent market at the best possible market price and motivate them to a high performance. I'm emphasizing market price because the whole idea of this supply and demand is not to lowball compensation negotiations, but to pay people what they deserve, which is the fair market price. Let's define first what is reward management. It is essentially the formulation and implementation of strategies and policies that aim to reward people fairly, equitably, and consistently. We're going to talk about these three words. What do they mean in practice? Reward them in accordance with their value to the organization. So reward management deals with design, implementation, and maintenance of reward processes and practices that's goal is to improve organizational, team, and individual performance. This means that the main goal of reward policies and processes and practices is to support the achievement of the organization's business goals. This seems to be very evident, but still, believe me, it gets overseen in many cases, which results in ineffective reward systems. This leads to disengagement from the employee's perspective and difficulties to attract and retain the right talent, which of course then blocks the effective execution of the business strategy. So what does that mean in concrete? What are the aims of a reward management system? Well, first of all, is to create the tool reward processes that are based on beliefs about what the organization values and wants to achieve. Then secondly, reward people for the value they create for the organization. Third, to reward the right things. In other words, reward expected behaviors and outcomes. Then, with that, facilitate the attraction and retention of the skilled and competent people the organization needs. Thus, with a very fashionable phrase, win the war for talent. And also to motivate people to commit, engage, and give their best at work. And this all results in the creation of a performance culture. So, in essence, reward and recognition is a key strategy enabler next to other important enablers like leadership, capabilities, processes, values, you can see on the slide. Without an effective reward system, you cannot build an effective organization that is able to execute on organizational goals. So now let's see what is total rewards, why we say total after all. World at Work distinguishes between compensation, benefits, and the work experience. Compensation elements are primarily financial in nature, and they satisfy the financial needs for income. The most important financial elements are base pay or salary, which reflects the value of the job, and bonuses. Bonuses can be tied to performance measures or not tied to performance measures. The other elements of compensation are not cash-based, but have financial values. These are, for example, share ownerships. Benefits can be financial or non-financial in nature, and they satisfy the protection needs and are usually unlikely to be performance-based. These two together make up the total remuneration. The last bucket that you see, which is the second pillar of total rewards, we can also identify as work or employee experience. These are the relational needs that bind employees to the organization more strongly because they satisfy an individual's needs, such as personal development and fulfillment, recognition, responsibility, meaningful work, autonomy, etc. You can read on the slide in the last bucket. So today we're going to mainly focus on in greater detail on compensation, so the financial part out of the remuneration bucket. So total rewards is defined by the underlying strategy and practices concerning financial and non-financial reward. What is reward strategy? Well, in essence, strategic reward management is the process itself of looking ahead at what an organization needs to do about its reward policies and practices in the middle or longer term. It is concerned with the broader business issues the organization is facing and the general direction in which reward management must go. It describes how reward policies will look like in a few years' time and also how we will reach that vision. Nowadays, when we talk a lot about how AI will impact the world of work, it is essential for every organization to assess the future impact of AI on the organization and consequently tool reward system. So why you develop a reward strategy, one may ask. Well, first you must have an idea where you're going, and how do you know how to get there if you don't know where you're going? And most importantly, how do you know that if that you arrived already if you don't know where you're going? Second, as I said, pay cost in most of organizations are by far the largest item of expenses on the P&L. So it makes sense to manage it strategically and plan how to invest it in the longer term. And third, there can be, in fact, there most probably is a positive relationship between rewards and performance. So it is quite basic to try to get it right. Reward is linked to other HR strategies as well, so it should support those, but at least not counteract them. I mean, HR strategies such as diversity and inclusion, um, um, and any HR strategy building a talent pool, succession management, etc. This means that the reward strategy should be aligned with business strategy. I will say that as many times as I'm able to, that business strategy is the starting point of every reward strategy. And also, it should be tied to HR strategy and, of course, the employee needs. From the strategy, underlying reward practices and policies are, of course, derived, which are then implemented essentially by the line managers. So their capability is an important and crucial aspect of developing an effective reward system. So, as always, there's no such thing as a reward strategy best practice because all the before mentioned elements are different in every business setting. But in general, all reward strategies should answer four basic questions. As I said, where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to get there? And what are the guiding principles that are guiding us along the way? So guiding principles are the basis of reward policies and provide guidelines for the actions that we are taking when implementing those reward strategies. They express the whole philosophy of the organization of how people should be rewarded. There are four general guiding principles an effective reward policy should be based on. That is fairness, equity, consistency, and transparency. Fairness means that the employee's view is considered and personal bias, as much as it's possible, towards the employees is ruled out. The criteria for decisions is being applied consistently, and employees are provided early feedback and are provided explanation about the outcome of decisions. Equity is achieved when people are rewarded appropriately in relation to others within the organization. So equitable reward processes ensure that relativities between jobs are measured and as objectively as possible, and equal pay is provided for work of equal value, and individuals are not subject to discrimination. The third one is consistency. It means that we do not randomly set pay within the organization, but according to the value the job represents for the company and the employee's contributions. And lastly, transparency. It means that people understand how reward processes operate and how they are affected by them. Now, again, these seem very, very evident, but trust me, in practice, they are very frequently overlooked. Managing expectations, applying rules consistently is something that needs to be kept in mind when you do anything in terms of rewards. Okay, so what are the internal and external influencers of tool rewards initiatives? First and foremost, business strategy. as reward programs are a mechanism to make a strong business strategy come to life, basically execute business strategy. Then culture, which is simply stated a set of shared values and beliefs that form over time as people interact and work together. The company vision, values, norms, and employee experiences are all part of the culture. Next is the workforce itself, as rewards must be tailored to meet the needs of an increasingly diverse pool of employees. Diversity and inclusion is also increasingly becoming an influencing factor. Reward leaders can help organizations achieve greater diversity while building an inclusive culture. How? Well, basically developing clear approaches for pay equity and transparency, career development, inclusive benefits, and many more. We addressed in a previous webinar we had back in December in terms of EU pay transparency. If you want to check out on our YouTube channel. Leadership is also an important influencer, as total reward programs are only effective when leaders play an active role to promote understanding and appreciation of the rewards programs. Apart from internal factors, of course, organizations must take into account several external factors as well, such as the competitive product and labor markets, regulatory environments, and the social and cultural norms a company is weaved into, affecting each area. In addition, rewards must be woven into the organization's HR strategy. Consider things like upskilling needs, the gig economy, AI's impact, or even employer brand. So in the 1950s, Herzberg conducted his famous study on factors affecting job attitudes. I'm sure you know that, so I'm not going to go into details with that. I want to just recap one aspect of the whole model. He identified, as you know, 16 factors and categorized them into 10 hygiene factors and 6 motivators. Motivators are being the things that when they are present, they motivate people. These are things like growth, advancement, responsibility, the work itself, recognition, and achievement. You can see it on the slide. I listed them all. As you see, motivators do not include pay and benefits. This means that in order to motivate an employee, a total rewards approach needs to be taken. Total rewards, remember in the previous slide, we mentioned it consists of the work or employee experience and the total remuneration. Herzberg said that money, as such, like other hygiene factors, can even be a dissatisfier if they are not present at an appropriate amount. It is definitely not a potential satisfier for sure, or a positive motivator. This theory has been then reinforced by other thinkers, like I'm sure you heard about Maslow, Ed Lawler, probably you heard about Peter Drucker, maybe Edward Deming, just to name a few of them. So while many organizations agree with the idea of total rewards, they often don't actually put a total reward strategy into practice. Just to name some of the common pitfalls that companies walk into. First is trying to engineer, or more likely re-engineer, programs in pieces. My advice is always re-engineer the entire program, not just, for example, the short-term variable pay program. So always try to take a holistic approach. The second common pitfall is trying to implement changes all at once. There should be so much change that employees can adapt to and is financially feasible. This second term is again very often overlooked when trying to design a new strategy, and then, astonishment comes when it's not approved. So when implementing radical changes, it is wise to allow 2 to 3 years time frame, depending on the scope of the change. And remember this number when you think about Pay Transparency Act, the EU's Pay Transparency Act that I referred to previously, coming to effect in June 2027. 2027 seems to be in the very distant future, but actually, if you calculate back this 2 to 5 years, is not so far. In fact, some of the companies need to start worry if they have to do the ground up work from scratch. The third common pitfall is limiting the number of people who are involved or involving too many. That's another pitfall or potential pitfall, but my experience is usually limiting the number of people is more common. So all relevant stakeholders should be involved in the process, which is not only HR, but also the executives, the people managers, finance, employees themselves, and the board of directors. The fourth one is not doing a thorough impact analysis of the financial and also the organizational, employee, and even the customer impact of the plans. And last but not least, I think the most common pitfall is not communicating effectively. I think this is the biggest mistake of all. It can be too much and too early communication, or even the flip side, too little and too late. So managing expectations from employees and not managing or dismanaging expectations can make even a very effectively designed reward system fail completely in practice. So a well-considered total reward strategy should address these elements that you see on the slide. Let's take them one by one. First and foremost, you know the drill, the link to business strategy. It should be an expressed statement, expressed clearly how the reward system is enabling the execution of the business strategy. Second, it should include statements that describe how the reward system will support the needs of the business by each reward element. So how each reward element is contributing to the execution of the business strategy. If you cannot clearly define a role for any given reward element, then probably you should question why it is being offered in the first place. The third is prominence. This means that the strategy should describe the overall importance of rewards relative to other elements of employer branding, like the values or the shared values of the company, cool products, or a very innovative market, or inspiring leadership, whichever. How I like to think about that is that you should picture a conversation among an employee and an outsider to the organization, and think about how you would like to the employee to refer to you as an employer. At what stage of the conversation should the employee refer to rewards packages as opposed to culture, quality of leadership? So would you like him to say that I like working here because I earn hell of a lot? Or you would like him to say that I like working here because I have great career opportunities, it's an exciting market, I like my manager, blah, blah, blah. The fourth one is fourth component of a reward strategy is performance measures. So the strategy itself should clearly identify the performance criteria to be rewarded, the appropriate level of the measurement for each and every reward element. Then the fifth is competitive market reference points. So the strategy should define the types of companies and industries or other reference points that will be used as a basis for determining the competitiveness of the rewards package. It sounds very complicated, but it's not. So basically, who are the other employers we are competing with for talent on the market? Then the competitive positioning. The strategy should clearly describe the desired competitive position relative to labor or talent competitive reference points. Do we want to lead, lag, or be at the market rate? Then the degree of internal equity and consistency. The strategy should also clearly define which is more important if internal equity and externally equity, or better said, competitiveness, are in conflict. You're going to see how they can be in conflict when we turn to the practice. Then communication, how much information about the rewards program will be disclosed and explained to employees, and the responsibilities of design and administration. Who is responsible for designing and managing the admin of the rewards? Then the governance and data and information management. This latter is how and from which sources do we collect data? How do we report? What are the processes for using data for decision making or decision support? So just very quickly, what are the main criteria for an effective reward strategy? So first and foremost, again, reinforces the achievement of corporate goals. Second, we want to recruit and retain the best talent from the talent market, the best talent with the right skills and with the right potential. The third, it should have a strong or state a strong relationship between pay and performance. Then it should, of course, reinforce the organizational values. It should be obviously motivating for our employees. It should be cost effective. As I said, the financial aspect is not something that we can overlook. It should be well communicated. Expectations around reward management and the reward system should be well managed. And it should be made sure that the staff or the employees understand what they need to expect. It should be managed effectively in practice by the line managers again. So it's not HR who is the main manager of the total reward system. And then it should be efficient to operate and maintain, and flexible enough to react quickly to change in the market. So now let's focus on compensation. As I said, this will be the key area of our focus for the for the rest of our webinar. There are 4 key pillars of every compensation system: internal consistency, external competitiveness, employee contributions, and the admin. Let's start with internal consistency. Practically, this involves collecting information about the nature of specific jobs in your organization and compiling documents that describe those jobs. So it also requires you to compare jobs and order them from high to low based on the value they provide to your organization. This includes job analysis, job descriptions, job evaluation, and job structure or job architecture. Then the second is external competitiveness. This is a process by which you do a market analysis to establish a pay policy. That process requires you to do a salary survey and compare your internal rates to external salaries in other organizations based on the benchmark employers that you want to benchmark yourself to. Based on your pay philosophy, you will adjust your current salaries to match the market comparisons. Remember, in the reward strategy, you have stated whether you want to lead, lag, or follow the market. Then the third one is employee contributions. That is to say, review your employees' performance against those well-defined performance standards, both in your industry and, of course, within your organization. And based on those standards, you will also create a process that rewards people based on merit. Merit and not seniority or gender or other biased metrics. And the last one is administration. It sounds maybe awkward, but nailing administration to plan for salary increases and more employees in the organization is absolutely crucial. It also includes a process to review your payroll budget, evaluate your employees, and communicate the system clearly and effectively. So now, establishing the whole system from the ground up is a very tedious and time-consuming work. But our experience also supports the fact that if you don't have any structure, you end up discriminating against people by paying them differently despite them doing the same job. If this happens with a male and a female, most of the time it is the female who gets less. With the new EU directives targeting gender equality at our door, this is soon to be penalized by law and cannot be hidden anymore. So according to the new EU directive on pay transparency coming to force in June 2027, as I said, if a candidate or an employee asks for the salary ranges in your company, you have to show it to him, which means if you don't have anything to show, you already breached the law. In addition, if you cannot justify a more than 5% pay difference between men and women, you again find yourself in trouble. We dedicated a whole webinar to this, so I really recommend for you to rewatch it or watch it for the first time. You find it on our YouTube channel, but also drop us a mail. We are happy to fill you in with the details. And we also have a white paper available for download on our website, so feel free to use that too. So let's see step by step how you establish a compensation system. So the -1 step is to understand the business strategy, the external environment, and the work culture. This is a context that is absolutely crucial to be taken into consideration throughout the entire process. Job analysis is considered the first step in determining base pay once we understand the context. The goal of job analysis is to understand what the job is actually about. Essentially, we want to systematically obtain, categorize, and of course, document any relevant information about a specific job by using questionnaires, checklists, observation, or interviews. Now, most of the time it would be interviews and blending of all this. So the most of the time we use interviews and questionnaires. Observation is mostly relevant in blue collar workers. The depth of a job analysis is depending on the context. So job analysis is typically performed when a position is either first created or when the job content changes in a very substantial manner. It is most common when an organization either reorganizes, downsizes, or changes due to merger and acquisition, or, for example, when they want to redesign the organization due to, for example, AI. Some jobs are so stable that no or minimal revision is required. So, for example, chief accountant probably will have similar main tasks, although the competencies tied to chief accountancy have changed quite substantially in the past, let's say 50 years. So we don't use paper anymore, etc. I don't need to go into details with that. So job analysis helps you essentially document the work methods and processes for even training purposes. You can use it as an onboarding input. Second, it provides basis for performance evaluations. And then, of course, it provides the basics for identifying job families and career paths within the organization. Also, if applicable, it helps in identifying job qualifications, determining if a job needs to be changed or updated, as I said, and develop a job-worthy hierarchy, a so-called job structure. And of course, it assists with legal and regulatory compliance. It's quite fashionable to discuss skill-based organizations and basically that job descriptions will become obsolete and we don't need a job description anymore. To be quite frank, my opinion about that, it's bullshit. So first of all, job description is a regularity requirement. Second, I don't think that if we leave out job descriptions and job analysis from the whole process, anything will change apart from maybe arriving to a much less fair, equitable, and consistent pay system. So let's see, but I'm more than welcome and happy to hear your opinion on that one. So if you have, please share it at the end of the webinar during the Q&A. What should be in a job analysis? Well, it should be, first of all, essential duties of the job, of course. The minimum qualifications, if there are, necessary education, experience, if it's relevant, skills, certifications, if again applicable, and if there are any physical, mental, or environmental factors that are necessary to perform the duties. Based on the job analysis, we prepared the job descriptions, which should include at least the following, as I said, essential job functions, qualification, knowledge, skills, abilities, physical and other demands, job duties, reporting structure, job family, and pay grade. Job descriptions are essential tools for conducting even job interviews, not to mention they are a regulatory requirement, but also for performance reviews, coaching, and employee development, or even disciplinary procedures and terminations where it is very crucial to have it right. Once we have all this, the next step is job evaluation, which ensures internal consistency and equity. There are two basic schools for job evaluation. First is the market-driven system, and second is the job board system. The latter is much more common, at least in Europe. The first one is more common for startups or smaller companies. In the market-driven system, the going rate for the market rate for the position is the primary determinant of pay and is mostly common, as I said, in the startup world. There are compensation specialists then attempt to resolve any potential inequities that are created by one of the several methods. Either they paying one position above the market in order to obtain internal equity, or they pay each position slightly different than the market in order to obtain internal equity, etc., etc. Market-driven systems should be monitored very closely to track changes in pay. The move from one set of external comparisons to another can result in substantial changes in recommended pay levels. So line managers are often frustrated by inequities with the market, especially when they have a hot candidate for a hard-to-fill job or when there are numerous long service employees in low market value positions. So most organizations, as I said, use job work systems and within that, the point factor evaluations. In a job work system, the primary determinant of pay is the value of the job to the organization. In some cases, a job work system can result in pay differences from the external marketplace. Again, managers may struggle with implementation as they try to find a way to reflect the market without, of course, violating the spirit of internal job worth or internal equity. These systems typically grant points for the presence of various factors, such as, for example, skills required to perform the job, or the effort required to achieve results, or the number of employees or financial assets supervised, the complexity of decisions that need to be taken during performing the job. At Highbridge Consulting, we have our own point factor system, what we use with clients when performing a job evaluation. The usual outcome of a formal job evaluation is a completely new or revised grade structure, which together with the market analysis provides the basis for designing and managing pay structures. We create a comprehensive job architecture with grades based on that. This is a structure of the jobs in the organization classified to job families and job codes. Whether an organization uses an internally or externally driven pay system, it is still important to compare pay practices to the external market. So most organizations participate either in regular surveys that gather data from a specific set of competitors, labor competitors, and release overall averages, medians, minimum, and maximum on an annual basis. Typically, not every position a company has is included in the survey. Those positions that are included, often called benchmarks, typically exist in most organizations with fairly similar responsibilities. There are several salary survey providers. I'm sure you heard of them. Korn Ferry is the most common to be used, but there is also Mercer and Towers Watson. However, this two-letter has less relevant benchmarks in Europe. In America, it's a different story. Every salary or market value range has a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. The factors in the point factor system define the lowest possible level that someone should be paid and the maximum pay levels. Usually the range is divided into quartiles. So the range is divided by 4, and 4 equal pieces make up one range. The second quartile of the range is what we call the median. I'm not going to go into statistics and many definitions, but this is something that you should know for sure. The median is defined as the point in the middle because there are equal amount of people above the median and below the median, below this point. So if you think about it a little bit, the average is very sensitive to high volatility. So if the spread between the highest earning person in the company and the lowest earning person in the company, and there are big, big outliers at each end, or at least on the high end, the average is going to be not a good representative of the most common salary in the company. This is why we use the median, because it's not sensitive to outliers. So the midpoint practically is the point where a fully qualified individual is paid. Most compensation systems try to gear merit increases to move the employees closest or within 10% range of the midpoint. The maximum is the highest rate paid for a position in that grade. I highly recommend you to remember this sentence. The maximum is the highest rate paid for a position in that grade. So you're going to understand why I'm saying that. But if a person reached the maximum, we're not going to give him or her a merit increase, even if his or her performance was outstanding. We're going to compensate that person in the bonus. Last but not least, the new pay structure needs to be implemented. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the grade structure. There may be a single structure with a sequence of narrow grades, often 8 to 12 grades, or relatively few broad bands, often 4 to 5, depending on the organization. Or the structure may also consist of a number of career or job families, each divided typically into 6 to 8 grades or levels. Grade structures become pay structures when pay ranges are defined for each grade, band, or level, and it's allocated. There may be a single pay structure covering the whole organization, or there may be one structure for white collar and one structure for blue collar workers. However, I think this is becoming less common. Executive directors are sometimes treated completely separately, where reward policies for them is decided by a remuneration committee for example, or they are paid at the market rate with a different logic. There are 5 different pay or grade structure, and the company should choose the one that is most suitable for its culture, characteristics, and needs. So the first one is the narrow graded structure. These are still very typical structures in the private sector, but the trend is to replace them with broad bands and career or job families. So this features a sequence of narrow pay ranges, as I said, aligned to 10 or more job grades. Progression is usually linked to performance. The advantage of this is that is clearly indicating pay relativities, and it facilitates the control of the whole system. It is also very easy to understand, but on the other hand, the disadvantage is that it creates a so-called hierarchical rigidity, and quite often it creates the phenomenon we call grade drift. What is grade drift? It is the process whereby jobs may be regarded and so migrate up a graded pay structure without any significant change in their content. So it means, as a consequence, job holders will receive a higher rate of pay without assuming extra responsibility or additional, more demanding job functions. So this type of structure is inappropriate in a delayered organization. It is better suited for a large, bureaucratic organization with well-defined hierarchies, and when close and very rigid control is required, and when some but not too much scope for pay progression related to performance is wanted. The second is the broad-banded structure. As I said, this is becoming much more common. Often there are 5 or 6 broad bands depending on the organization specificities. So these are wide pay bands, typically 50 to 80%. Progression is linked to contribution and competence. This structure is much more flexible and rewards lateral development and growth in competence as well. The disadvantage, however, is that is much more difficult to understand and can create pay equity issues. Promotion becomes much less frequent, which might be an issue, and this fits, although much better, a new style, a skill-based or a delayered organization where much more flexibility in pay determination is wanted. And also where the focus is on continuous improvement and lateral development and management, and of course, management capability is much high, so it can be managed in practice. The third one is career family based. In this model, career families are defined. Career families consist of jobs in a function like marketing, operations, finance, and the successive levels in each career family are defined by reference to the key activities carried out and the knowledge, skills, and competencies required to perform them effectively. Typically, career structures have 6 to 8 levels. Within each career family, then, there are defined career paths for progressing to higher levels and routes for pursuing careers in other families as well. Same grade and pay structure exists for each family. And it also clarifies career path within and between the families. So this facilitates the achievement of equality. It could be difficult to manage, however, and could contribute to silos in the organization. So it suits better organization where there is a strong emphasis on career development, and also where different career paths or career routes within and between families can be identified and defined. Job family is pretty similar. The only difference is that job families are typically based on common processes. So for example, IT, finance, and HR would be identified as separate in a career family structure, but a job family approach might combine these as, for example, business support. And the last one is pay spine. this is a series of incremental pay points covering all the jobs. Here, the progression is usually linked to service or tenure. It is easy to manage, and it is mostly common in public sector or voluntary organization. In addition to these structures, as I mentioned, in small companies, it is also common to set prices to the market. This means they don't have a formal pay structure in place, but rather when they are hiring, they set salary levels to the market simply. Okay, so upon selecting an optimal salary framework, the next step is to establish the quantity of pay scales required. So your salary structure's pay grades will vary based on whether a narrow or broad-banded approach is taken, as well as the organization size and hierarchical levels. Typically, as I said, CEOs and board members are excluded from standard pay scales due to differing contractual conditions. They may have a distinct pay scales reflective of the general salary principles applicable to other roles. So when defining the salary range within these pay scales, it's essential to factor in the range overlap, the reference points, and as well the pay zones. So each salary band is characterized by a minimum, a maximum, and typically a reference point, commonly set at the 100% mark. This reference point, however, may not always align with the midpoint of a salary range, as you see on the slide as well. So the reference point serves actually a dual purpose. So internally, it represents the target salary for employees who achieve baseline performance expectation. Externally, it's used to compare against the market rate. Initially, newcomers to the organization will earn below the 100% mark, but they are expected to progress to this level as they advance in their role. To retain long-serving, high-value employees, organizations may offer compensation beyond the 100% reference point, but not beyond the maximum, so beyond the reference point, forming a so-called premium zone. This is to encourage continued engagement and commitment for long-serving employees within one specific grade. This zone may also consist of challenging to fill roles. Defining the reference point requires assessing your organization's pay scale overlaps and salary range breadth. Overlap is essential because it permits greater adaptability and also decreases or mitigates premature promotions. So it aligns long-term or high-performing staff with those less experienced or newly promoted despite being in different salary grades. Broad-banded structures are favored for the diversity of jobs. They consolidate into a wider pay band, offering managers much more latitude and less intricate framework than their narrow-banded counterparts. Nonetheless, to maintain fair internal compensation and to prevent overpaying, pay zones, as I mentioned before, are implemented within the broad band. These zones are like demarcation lines. So within the broad bands, they ensure that salary progression does not outspeed or outpace an employee's contribution to the company. To offer competitive salaries, it is critical to align your pay policy positioning within the market. So no matter which job grade structure you use, you will have to define the salary ranges and align them to the market. The market in this case is defined as the relevant labor market, as I mentioned before. This can be much, much broader than the group of competitors that all operate in the same market. So if, for example, an FMCG company might hire people from the financial industry or even manufacturing. The pool of candidates is much broader, and some roles are transferable between industries, like the example I said. Um, yeah. So benchmarking does not tell you what to do, of course. Differentiation might be much more effective than copying your competitors' pay policies. Benchmarking only serves as one data point to help you design your reward approach. You can decide to, as I said in the beginning when we talked about what to include in the reward strategy, you can decide to lag or lead the market or pay at the market rate. You can also choose to differentiate for certain jobs only. For example, for hot jobs where skills are very scarce and competition is very fierce, you might want to lead the market and pay, for example, the 75th percentile or above, but definitely above the median. For certain roles where turnover is low and the job market is very supply driven and managing attrition is not an issue, it could be even that you decide to lag the market and pay below the median. This is also common for startups or smaller companies where other elements of total rewards are compensating the lower salary levels due to financial feasibility. In any salary structure you choose, you have to align your structure and pay practice in one way or another. So this decision is dependent on the data service provider you use to compare your compensation data with the market. Therefore, the defined reference points in your structure are very important. In a narrow-banded structure, this is generally, as I said, the 100% point, which means that the point where an employee is basically ticking all the boxes in the role, doing everything as expected. In a broad-banded or job or career family structure, reference levels are defined by which point you align with the market. This could be at the point where an employee fulfills all the responsibility of the roles as expected at this level in the band, or job family level as well. In the salary policy is if the salary policy is in place and reference points are aligned with the market, they need to be maintained to be able to follow the external market developments. You will have to adjust them based on inflation or price index and real market increase due to economic growth. You will see an increase in wage or salary levels on top of inflation or price index, but I'm hoping to address this later when we talk about how much of a role inflation plays in determining merit increases. So let's move over to pay progression. So pay progression is essentially how salaries are increasing with levels. So after finalizing the base salary structure, it's crucial to align current employees within this framework and project their potential progression. In any pay structure, whichever you choose, employees are placed within specified salary range. Those new to the workforce typically start at the lower end, and those meeting all the job requirements situate near the reference points, and standout performers or those with exceptional experience may earn a little bit above this level. The question then arises, what is the trajectory that the employee's salary should follow from the base pay to the reference point? What criteria will govern their salary growth, and how will this advancement occur uniformly for all employees? There are three prevalent approaches to managing salary increments you see on the slide. Some models consider only tenure, with each additional year translating to a fixed increment in pay, irrespective of performance. This is, as I said, most relevant in the public sector. Alternatively, merit-based increases can vary, with high performers probably ascending multiple steps in a single year, distinguishing them from average or low performers. Another variation features the diminishing increments as salaries approach the top of the scale, mirroring basically a learning curve, um, steeper for the newly initiated and flatter for the seasoned employees. For those aiming to closely align raises with performance, a merit matrix offers a tailored increase percentage based on individual achievement and position within the pay scale. The model favors strong performers and potentially granting them a much more substantial raise, sometimes exceeding the market rate. Organizations might also set uniform raise percentages across the board to provide managers with the flexibility to reward impactful team members differentially. However, within global entities, it's likely to encounter country-specific matrices reflecting local economic conditions. Again, I cannot emphasize enough, clear communication is essential to prevent any misunderstandings and dissatisfaction among the workforce. So let's go over to implementation. Implementing a new or revised grade and pay structure is a huge change management effort. It can be made a little easier if the employees are involved in the design phase of the whole process. But it's absolutely essential to communicate the purpose and features of the new structure and how everyone will be affected. Employees should be informed that while no one will necessarily get an extra pay, no one will lose. This is what we call the protection policy. So there are two policies we need to talk about here, assimilation policies and protection policies. It is also necessary that training is provided for everyone concerned in admin or the governance of rewards, especially people managers, because ultimately it should be the people managers managing pay practices in a day-to-day. Above all, the hard part is of implementation arrives when the assimilation of staff to the new structure has to take place. It is necessary, as I said, to have an assimilation policy on where staff will be assimilated. This is actually at their existing salary, most probably. There are essentially four categories of staff to be covered by the assimilation policy, but effectively there are only two categories which require work. So the first category is those staff whose current actual pay and the pay potential are both within the pay range for the new grades or the new reward structure to which their jobs are allocated. Thus, for these employees, their salaries are within the range, to put it simple. No action here. The second is those staff whose current pay lies within the new pay range, but whose pay potential is greater than the new maximum. To make this more understandable, it says that their salaries is within the range, but they would stay probably longer in the role, and given the average merit increases every year, if they get a merit increase, they might be passing beyond the maximum limit, which is an absolute no-no. So if they reach the maximum limit, they would be then compensated in their bonuses for their above average performance. Then the third and the fourth are the most cumbersome. The third one is the staff whose current pay is below the minimum for the new grade. That's cumbersome because of financial feasibility to cover for the difference. And the fourth one is those staff whose current pay is above the maximum for the new grade. So let's only talk about the third and the fourth for the sake of time. So the third group is when, as I said, the current pay is below the minimum of the new grade. Both fairness and equity, which are the two guiding principles in our reward strategy, demand that if someone has now been identified as being underpaid, the situation should be rectified as quickly as possible. So correcting this situation should be the very first call on any money allocated to assimilation policy or merit increases. Each case, of course, should be handled individually. If, for example, someone has recently been appointed to a position and given a pay increase at that time, it may be appropriate to wait until that person has completed the probationary period before awarding them another pay increase. Again, if the total cost of rectifying this underpayment is more than the organization can afford, which I can tell you most of the time is the case, it may be necessary to phase the necessary increases. It is not advisable to phase these kind of actions over more than 1 or 2 years for sure, but you can decide to do it in more than one phase. The last group is when current pay is above the maximum of the range. These are the red circle situation, and these are usually the most difficult to handle. They normally include a high proportion of people who have been in their current role for a very long time. There are discussions among experts how to best handle such a situation. One group argues that since it has been clear that these people earn more than the job is actually worth to the company, this should be stopped as soon as possible, especially if the organization needs the money to pay more for those who are being underpaid. The opposite view is that these people have become accustomed to a standard of living based on the pay that the organization has been providing or giving them, and they should not suffer just because new standards are being applied. This is the principle that is usually adopted, but there are different ways of applying it. Approaches to protection, and here protection policy comes into play, can be the following. The first one is indefinite protection. This means that it sets out that the difference between the current pay and the range maximum is maintained as long as this employee remains in this job, in this role. Well, in my opinion, this is really not the best way to do it. The second is the more common approach is to provide for red circle employees to receive any across the board cost of living increases awarded to other staff generally for a protection period, which is usually maximum 2 to 3 years. And after that, they will no longer will be entitled to general increases um, until their salary falls within the new range, so within the new maximum. Throughout the protection period, and especially at the start of it, every attempt should be made to resolve the red circle cases by other means. So, for example, if job holders are thought to be worth the current salary, they may be underused in their current jobs. So, attempts should be made to resolve this by either increasing their job responsibilities so that the job will justify the higher grade, or moving the person to a higher graded job as soon as an appropriate vacancy is available. So from this, you can see that the project of designing a new pay structure can take years, including implementation. So when we think about the EU's new Pay Transparency Act coming to effect in 2027, it becomes absolutely clear that we need to act now in order to comply. So if you want to know more about that, as I said, check out the webinar, download our white paper, and get in touch with us. We are happy to answer any of your questions. So now let's see what are the steps of salary increases. So the first step is to rerun market analysis benchmarking. This ensures that salaries remain competitive. So if the market signal is that the pay ranges are reaching the market median, then there is no obligation to increase salaries unless the aim is to achieve a higher market position. Remember, leading or lagging the market. The next step is to model the financial impact of the proposed salary increase. The funding for the pay increase comes from the revenue side, obviously. Sometimes the coverage may not be sufficient for the planned salary increase. This is the basis for finalizing the financial plan, approving the budget for a salary increase, and establishing the new pay ranges. And the next step is the performance appraisal, which takes place at the individual, the group, and the company level. The individual performance appraisal is used as a basis for differentiating salary increases. Remember the merit matrix we addressed previously. The rules for this must be laid down in advance in the merit matrix. The approved budget for the salary increase is then spent according to these differentiation rules. So now let's see what are the common mistakes very quickly. Well, the basic mistake is usually that differentiation is not based on real performance. The basic rule here is that the better performers should receive more merit recognition, which means a higher bonus payment. The reason I mentioned bonus again and not salary is that, again, if someone is a high performer and is already at the top of the pay range, this does not necessarily mean a pay rise. Because if you go outside of the pay range, you have overridden your own rule and you go against equity and consistency and fairness. In other words, we differentiate not necessarily in terms of salary increases, but in terms of bonuses, pay for performance in terms of bonuses. And of course, in non-monetary recognitions. This could be, for example, inclusion in a talent program. Bonus differentiation also requires a pre-established bonus target or reference point, but that's quite evident. A typical mistake here is that the companies say that I'm not giving as much bonus as I did last year due to declining performance. Well, the criterion is not how much you received last year, but how you performed or the employee performed in the given financial year. So in terms of salaries, the important thing is to always put high performers in the third or fourth quartile of the pay range. But once they are here, I don't increase their salary even if they have done well during the financial year. There are cases, for example, in support areas where it is quite typical that someone is at the top of the pay band and has performed well, but the overall company results that do not allow them to get a bonus. They will still get all the pay increases on an exception basis. The rationale behind this practice is that it's cheaper to do this than to replace the talent. Not all jobs are of equal value, so hot skill jobs or jobs that are in high demand in the market are always positioned higher so that we can hire and retain the workforce. But pay equity in general should never be forgotten despite all the differentiation that we are doing. So let's see a hot topic, inflation, and how is inflation determining salary increases. So as I said before, salary increases depend largely on the following factors: business environment, the company's financial performance, the available budget, the macroeconomic indicators like inflation, and market trends. In addition to these factors, it is also worth looking at whether there are challenges in retaining and recruiting staff. So these hot skill jobs, as we referred to before. Because if so, there may be a need to spend more on certain groups of employees. So as you can see, if inflation is only one factor out of the many that is considered that is influencing pay rise. So Importantly, inflation does not equal the wage growth trend in a given sector or market. However, if inflation is high, like double digits, for example, like last year, then it is worth considering so-called inflation tracking wage increases, which should start with low-income jobs in particular, as they are typically the ones who feel the money pinch the most, so who feel most affected by inflation. Many employers are also introducing semi-annual pay reviews, like more than one pay review because of the high inflation, like last year. Let's see very quickly another hot topic, as I want to be respectful of your time. So we regularly get the question from our clients: how should we manage remote roles where we hire from the global talent market? This is especially common among IT roles, which are hot skills jobs in the market. So getting the pay right is exceptionally important. So in the past, salaries were typically based on office location. So as employees increasingly work remotely, there is no office location by which to set the salaries. In this new environment, work follows the employee, not the other way around. There are four major ways to set compensation levels for work from anywhere workers. The appropriate approach should be really defined by your total rewards philosophy and your organization's approach to remote working. So the first one is to align all compensation with company headquarters. So in this approach, pay, no matter if in the office or remote distributed, is based on the HQ location and each employee's role. So a remote worker in a low cost of living location might receive um, a windfall or an increased purchasing power due to the difference in cost of labor at the HQ location and his own location. Conversely, the other way around, a remote employee who lives in a high cost of living location might experience lower purchasing power. The fundamental philosophy is that a given role has a certain value to the organization, and it does not matter where the role is located. Companies, by the way, that employ this strategy might pay a national rate for a position as opposed to a location-specific market rate. So this could be helpful if you have multiple offices or no major office. The second strategy is current market level pay for the location. So this approach assesses the market pay rate for the position in the location of the remote worker. So this means organization would pay for the position based upon how other organizations in the remote worker's location pay a similar position. Sounds very complicated, but if, for example, I have an HQ in Munich, where Esther is located, and I have employees located in Malta, Poland, India, and Kenya, for example, I'm going to pay them for based on their own location, not the HQ. Okay, so it takes, not needless to say, significant time and money to understand what the market pay rate is in a particular location. So in my view, this is only feasible when you don't have too many locations. So there could also be locations where market pay data is not even available. So, and plus, I think this approach is not always transparent, and there may be many questions about the criteria used when evaluating the market pay. So, and it's also misaligned with the remote concept, because how do you deal with people moving around? The idea of market pay is a supply-demand argument specific to the location, as I said. So because in the past, the supply could only come from that location. But since remote work, supply-demand is something that we define on the global level or at least the national level, it doesn't really fit to base the pay on a particular market because that doesn't match the true supply for the remote position. So I would not go for that. The third one is develop geographical differentials. The prior two approaches are extremes. The first is one size fits all approach, while the second applies to differentiated, individualized salaries for each remote worker. The third option is the golden middle. So to provide some differences, but not by every person and location. For larger companies with diverse work locations, this is already a popular approach. So in this approach, organizations define a salary structure that is for HQ or a specified base location. Based on estimated competitive pay, you establish a geographically differentiated salary structure. You can have as many as you want, but usually it's 3, maximum 10. Each remote worker location could be slotted into one of these salary structures. We usually use cost of living information to set geographical structures. Many companies use this cost approach as it is easy to communicate and easily understood by employees. The fourth one is pay based on cost of living. So in this approach, companies set competitive pay based on the HQ location and then use a cost of living approach to adjust the compensation up or down based on where the employee lives and works. This is very similar to the previous approach, but more specific to an individual situation. So in terms of remote work, there is another frequently asked questions. How do we treat pay transparency when the job can be done from different locations? So here, I think the rule of thumb should be that we disclose the ranges in each location where we are hiring in the job posting and or the HQ ranges and the method itself of how we want to adjust or not adjust to the local market. So I'm very sorry just to leave so little time at the end, but actually this wraps up our webinar. So we have 5 minutes, but we are happy to overrun a little bit. We have Katalin in our call. She's our external external consultant in terms of rewards. She's really a reward champion. So Esther will open up the mics, and if you want to ask any questions, please feel free. You will need to unmute yourself. Esther will allow you to unmute yourself, hopefully now. Technology is
I'm on it.
Not always on our side, but we are working on it. In the meantime, I want to say just a couple of words as a recap. So as you saw, compensation is a super complex, and I'm sure some of the webinar were not completely new to you. I'm a big fan of recap and revisiting the basics simply because in the rushed world of everyday life, we tend to forget the basics, and that can create a problem. I'm sorry if I bored you in the beginning. I hope for those very seasoned reward specialists, we were still able to provide some interesting bits and pieces of compensation. And as for help, so be sure, rest assured that it's very tedious, very complicated work. So if you don't have a reward specialist assigned to this task, then don't be shy to ask for help. And as I said, time is not on our side. 2027 may seem distant, but it's not. And CSRD, which is another EU directive coming to force in 2025, where you will already need to report on 2024 numbers, already has a part for pay equity, so gender pay equity. So I'm really highly advise you to seek for help. We are ready to help. There are other providers as well. And just give us a call. We are happy to discuss where you are. That's completely free. We're not gonna try to sell our services when you don't need them. So we can discuss where you are and how we see your roadmap for compliance with these two very important directives coming to force. So thanks, guys, for the attentions. Don't leave. Please stay if you can and if you don't starve. And floor is yours. You can ask any questions you may have.
The mics are open.
Yeah, the mics are open, so you will need to unmute yourself before you start talking.
I would ask a question from Kati if nobody else is raising a question.
Sure, Esther.
Okay, so the question the question is that Fanny was as well talking about that organizations are getting more fluid and getting towards the skill-based kind of nation. How do you see the evolution of the job evaluation methodologies in this new setup?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Esther, because we are changing. We are in a transformative period, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of articles around skills-based organizations out there. So what is really important that skills are changing. So we also have skills today and competencies that we use, but these skills are rapidly changing due to the different environment and requirements. So I don't think I need to mention generative AI or all these other sexy new skills that you need to take up and learn. So I would say that the job evaluation method would change in a way that all these new skills will be critical, and we will measure the importance and the existence of all these new skills when we hire people. The best is when an organization develops their own people internally to get up all these new skills and knowledge. That is always the best, rather than hiring people from outside. So just to answer to your question, the method itself, I would say, will not change, but the focus will be definitely on these new skills which are required for the new job contents, the new jobs, what we are creating with the new technologies, with the new tendencies.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat.
I see.
Thanks, Kati.
Yeah.
So how do you calculate performance in areas that requires precision rather than quantity, and in areas where they can be pushed to produce a lot and also can be under influence from other departments such as compliance, legal, and internal audit?
Yeah. Yes. So I don't know if it's a good or bad news, but everybody can be measured on something. So yes, there are positions where we have a direct impact on fiscal results or success, like the revenue generating roles. But without a support function, you cannot operate successfully. So of course, it's not easy to set up a KPI or a measure for legal, for talent. But overall, all these functions are very, very important and play a key role in keeping up the budget on an operating side. So operating within a budget, which is important for the financial success. So we're not getting revenue, but we need to keep our own budgets, how we operate. And also in all of the roles, whether you think of talent or reward, we do have overall KPIs where we are responsible for the culture, for the retention, for the satisfaction of our people, and all these measures can be put in place. We have no time to talk that through, but if someone is interested in these set of KPIs, which are not individually driven, because they are not, that I think I can say, Fanny, that we are happy to provide some guidance on that. But the good news is that everybody can be measured on something. That's very, very important and should be actually as well. And I also saw Gergely's question related to KPIs, that's not a good KPI if someone works 12 hours. A good KPI is something which is driving success, whether this is business success or effectiveness or productivity. If someone is rewarded for the long hours, that does not drive anything, that drives cost only. So it's not earned in the end in other form like effectiveness or revenue, right? But again, we can help with you all, with all of these KPIs as well.
Absolutely. It's part of the consultancy, actually, when we do a framework
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this.
Yes.
So there was basically that's not a question. That's only an answer from Ruxandra that for legal you can have a target to
Not to
not
get
be involved
involved.
in any litigation, and
Mm.
if the case, to minimize the impact, and for GDHR have a target linked with legal that we don't have any lawsuit from any employees. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
thank you
Is
for
that
that.
just on both? Yeah.
Exactly. So if there are not any more questions, we are open to questions after the webinar as well. So feel free to ping us over LinkedIn or through email. You see our email address on the slide right now. Get in contact, and don't shy away from this because it's a very tedious and complex thing. There are many providers out there. I think our expertise stands out, and we are a flexible company, not overcharging you and not trying to push you into something that you don't need. So rest assured, even if you ask a consultancy, which is free for the first one, we are not going to try to persuade you to spend the money with us if you don't want to. So no strings attached. Get in touch, ask questions. Let's continue the discussion, and stay tuned for our next webinar. We will try to continue on this topic because there are many untapped and uncovered areas of total rewards that we didn't have time to address today. So stay tuned. We're going to come back after the commercials.